He was a former SWAT officer who had retreated to the mountains to escape the ghosts of his past. But one fateful night, the storm brought the war back to his doorstep. A federal agent had crashed deep in a frozen ravine, her body broken, her mission unfinished. Ethan Cross and his loyal shepherd, Ranger, were the first to find her buried beneath the snow. What they uncovered that night was more than a rescue. It was the beginning of a battle against the same darkness that once destroyed his team. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. The night draped over Pine Ridge like a heavy woolen shroud, and the air was so cold it seemed to burn with every breath. The snow fell in relentless waves, swallowing the mountain road in white silence. The headlights of a lone government-issued SUV cut through the darkness, revealing brief flashes of icy guardrails and black pine shadows. Inside the vehicle sat Kara Holt, a 34-year-old federal investigator from Denver, her eyes sharp and sleepless. She had the kind of beauty that came not from delicacy, but from endurance. Pale skin drawn tight by long hours and long winters, dark hair pulled into a low, practical knot, and faint lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of too many stakeouts and too few nights of rest. There was a quiet determination in her face, a steadiness that had carried her through interrogations and near misses. Yet tonight, beneath that composure, her pulse raced faster than the snowstorm outside. She had evidence in her bag, encrypted files and photos, enough to expose a major military-grade weapons ring that stretched from the Rockies to the eastern ports. It was the kind of case that made careers or ended lives. Her wipers struggled against the thickening snow as the narrow road twisted like a silver snake between cliffs. She kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping a steel thermos that had long since gone cold. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. Kara's thoughts flickered back to the message she'd received an hour ago. Emergency patch update for your vehicle tracker. Upload now to avoid system error. It had come from an encrypted channel marked as internal. She'd followed the instructions. She had no reason not to. Now, the thought gnawed at her. Something in her gut, that deep, trained instinct she'd learned to trust, whispered that she had made a mistake. Then the dashboard lights flickered. Once. Twice. A soft click echoed beneath the steering column, and the wheel locked in her hands. "No," she breathed, twisting, pressing the brakes. The tires caught a patch of black ice. The SUV fishtailed, the headlights flashing over the cliff's edge, and then the world turned upside down. The car tumbled, metal shrieking against stone, before coming to rest upside down in a snow-filled ravine. The last thing Kara saw was the shattered reflection of her own eyes in the windshield before everything went dark. Miles away, buried deep in the forest, a cabin stood against the storm. Inside, a single oil lamp burned beside the window. Ethan Cross, 40 years old, former SWAT team leader, sat sharpening a hunting knife beside the crackling wood stove. His face bore the quiet ruggedness of a man who had known too much violence and too little peace. Tanned skin creased with years of sunlight and combat dust, a jawline rough with a few days' stubble, and eyes the gray-blue of a winter river. His hair, once black, was streaked with silver along the temples. The scars, along his forearm, thin, pale lines, were relics from a mission that had gone wrong, a raid that had cost his entire squad. He had survived, but not intact. Since then, he had retreated to the woods, where the only sounds were the whisper of wind and the low breathing of his companion, Ranger, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a black and tan coat and intelligent amber eyes. Ranger had been trained for search and rescue back when Ethan still wore a badge. Now, he was the only partner Ethan trusted. When the distant echo of metal and thunder reached the cabin, Ethan's head snapped up. Ranger's ears pricked, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan set the knife down, the old instincts already flooding back. He stood, pulling on a heavy canvas jacket, snow boots, and a flashlight from the hook by the door. "Let's go, boy," he muttered. Ranger barked once, short, clipped, ready. The blizzard outside was ferocious. Snow whipped across his face like shards of glass. The wind howled between the trees, but somewhere beneath it, Ethan caught the faint hiss of leaking fuel. He moved by instinct more than sight, following the smell of gasoline and the distant orange glow of emergency lights. When he reached the ravine, he saw the SUV, its roof crushed, one wheel still spinning uselessly. He slid down the embankment, boots digging into ice. "Hello? Anyone inside?" His voice was nearly swallowed by the storm. A faint groan answered him. Ethan smashed the window with the butt of his flashlight and crawled halfway inside. A woman hung upside down by the seatbelt, her face streaked with blood and melting snow. Her breathing was shallow but steady. "Stay with me," he said, his voice low but commanding, the tone of a man who had said those words too many times before. He cut the seatbelt and caught her as she fell. Her badge glinted faintly on her torn jacket. Federal investigator. "Damn it!" He checked her pulse, relieved to find it strong. Ranger barked sharply above, pacing at the ridge line. "We've got her, Ranger. Let's move!" Ethan carried her up the slope, his muscles screaming in the cold. The snow came down thicker, obliterating any sign of tire tracks. By the time they reached the cabin, his coat was frozen stiff. He laid her on the old sofa near the fire, stripped off her wet jacket, and wrapped her in a wool blanket. Ranger hovered nearby, eyes alert but calm, as if recognizing another wounded soul. Ethan cleaned the small cut above her eyebrow, working with steady hands. There was something strangely fragile about her. Not weakness, but exhaustion, the kind that came from years of fighting battles you couldn't win. He'd seen that look before, in the mirror, years ago. As he worked, his eyes fell on her side holster. Empty. Whoever had done this had taken her weapon. "Who the hell are you and what did you bring to my door?" he muttered quietly. Ranger, still pacing, suddenly stopped. The dog's nose twitched. He moved toward Kara's shredded jacket lying on the floor, pawed at one of the pockets, then let out a low whine. Ethan walked over, curious, and lifted the jacket. There, lodged near the inner seam, was a small fragment of metal, charred at the edges, reeking faintly of burnt circuitry. He frowned, turning it in his gloved fingers. It was no car part he recognized. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. He dropped it into a tin box on the shelf, the kind he used for spent bullet casings, and shut the lid. For now, it could wait. The storm raged through the night. Kara stirred once or twice, murmuring something incoherent, fragments of a name, or maybe a warning, before falling still again. Ethan sat in the chair beside the fire, watching the snow slam against the window. Ranger curled near the door, one ear twitching, eyes never fully closed. For the first time in years, Ethan felt that old tension creeping back. The sense that trouble was no longer something he had left behind, but something that had come looking for him. He glanced at the woman lying unconscious beneath the flickering firelight, and felt a faint, unspoken recognition. She looked like someone who had been fighting alone for too long. When the fire popped, Ethan stood, poured himself a cup of lukewarm coffee, and stared out the frosted window towards the forest. Somewhere beyond the storm, he thought he heard an engine. faint, distant, fading. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe someone else was out there, watching. He turned back to the couch, to the woman he had dragged from the wreck. "Whoever you are," he said softly, "you just changed everything." Outside, the storm buried the road in white silence. The forest, vast and indifferent, kept its secrets. Inside, 2 lives, one broken by guilt, one hunted by betrayal, had just collided in the heart of the wilderness. And on the wooden floor beside the fire, a small, burnt piece of metal gleamed faintly, as if alive. The morning arrived slowly, pale light seeping through the cracks of the shuttered windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world buried under heavy snow. The forest outside the cabin was silent except for the sound of melting ice dripping from the eaves. Ethan Cross stood by the wood stove, his face shadowed by fatigue and the faint orange glow of the fire. He hadn't slept much. The woman he had rescued, Kara Holt, lay wrapped in blankets on the couch, her breathing finally steady. The small tin box on the shelf, the one that held the burnt fragment of metal, seemed to hum quietly in the back of his thoughts. A knock came at the door, firm and deliberate. Ranger lifted his head and growled low. Ethan opened it to find a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, his beard frosted with snow. Logan Pierce, the regional forest ranger, stepped in with a gust of cold air. Logan had the kind of solid presence that came from a lifetime outdoors, tall, barrel-chested, with wind-burned skin and eyes as green and sharp as pine needles. His thick coat bore patches of pine sap, and his voice carried that calm drawl of a man who knew every ridge and ravine for 50 miles. Once, long ago, he had served in the army with Ethan before choosing a quieter life tending the wilderness. It was Logan who had helped Ethan settle here after the SWAT raid that ended his career, and nearly ended his will to live. "Snow's cleared a bit," Logan said, stamping his boots. "Figured you'd need supplies." His gaze shifted to the couch, to the unconscious woman. "You've been busy." Ethan poured him a mug of coffee. "Found her last night. Wrecked car down in the ravine, maybe a mile from here. She's federal, judging by the badge." Logan's brows furrowed. "You call it in?" "Not yet. Something's off about it." Ethan opened the tin box and showed him the small, charred fragment of metal. "Pulled this from her jacket. Doesn't look like a car part." Logan leaned closer, squinting. "That's no accident sensor. Looks like part of a remote EMP trigger. Military tech." He glanced at Ethan, concern flickering beneath his calm exterior. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Ethan nodded grimly. That someone wanted her car off the road. While Logan tended to Kara's bandaged arm and made her a warm compress, Ethan geared up, heavy coat, tactical gloves, and his old 9mm sidearm, which he hadn't touched in years. Ranger wagged his tail once, sensing the mission before it began. "Stay close," Ethan told the dog as they left. "And quiet." The drive to the crash site was short, but treacherous. Snow crunched underfoot as they descended the ravine. The wreckage lay twisted among the rocks, half buried in white. It should have been still, a graveyard of steel and silence. But there were fresh footprints. Human. 2 sets. Ethan froze. Ranger's ears pricked up. The dog's low growl vibrated against the cold air. Through the curtain of falling snow, Ethan spotted them. 2 men crouched beside the car, prying at the undercarriage. They wore dark winter gear, no insignia, faces hidden behind ski masks. One held a tablet device, the other a pair of pliers glinting in the light. They weren't rescuers. Ethan signaled to Ranger with a subtle motion of his hand. The shepherd lowered his body, ready to strike. Then Ethan stepped forward, gun drawn. "Don't move!" he barked. The men spun, startled, one reaching for his belt. Ranger exploded into motion, a streak of muscle and snow. The dog hit the first man hard, knocking him into the drift, teeth bared. The second man fired wildly, the shot echoing like thunder. Ethan dropped to one knee, returning fire with precision. The bullet hit the man's shoulder, sending him sprawling behind the wreck. Ranger's growl deepened, the sound primal and raw. Ethan closed the distance, kicked the gun away from the first man, and pressed his knee to his chest. The masked intruder thrashed once before going still. His partner, bleeding, scrambled towards the trees, leaving a dark trail on the snow. "Ranger, hold!" Ethan commanded. The dog obeyed, though every muscle in his body quivered with the urge to chase. Ethan ripped the mask from the subdued man's face, a hard, angular jaw, scar running down one cheek, eyes the cold gray of steel. Not local. Military posture, disciplined even in defeat. "Who sent you?" Ethan demanded. The man's lip curled. "You don't want to know." Ethan's gaze flicked to the car. Something metallic glinted near the wheel well. He stepped closer and saw it. A knife, half buried in snow, its handle engraved with a small, stylized falcon. The emblem was unmistakable, a black talon clutching a circle. Ethan felt his stomach twist. He turned back to the man, but the intruder used the distraction to jerk sideways, knocking Ethan off balance. They grappled, slipping on the icy ground. Ethan's training took over. 2 strikes, fast and efficient. The man crumpled, unconscious. Ethan stood over him, chest heaving, the knife clutched in his gloved hand. The storm clouds were clearing, revealing the pale outline of the mountains. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. The Black Talon Syndicate. He hadn't heard that name in years, not since the night his unit was ambushed on foreign soil by mercenaries flying that same insignia. The mission had been classified, buried under red tape, but Ethan remembered every scream, every face. They weren't supposed to exist anymore. When he looked down at the symbol again, the edges of his vision darkened with old rage. By the time he dragged the unconscious man back to the truck, the second attacker was gone. He left the knife in the glove compartment, its sharp black mark burning in his mind. Back at the cabin, the fire was still going. Logan looked up as Ethan entered. Snow caked to his coat. "What the hell happened out there?" "Company," Ethan said shortly. He set the man down on the floor, bound at the wrists with paracord. Logan's eyes hardened. From the couch, a soft voice spoke. "You found them, didn't you?" Kara was awake now, sitting up slowly. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders, her face pale but alert. Even injured, she carried herself with quiet authority. Her brown eyes locked on Ethan, then the bound man. "They were waiting for me." Ethan handed her the knife. "You recognize this?" Kara took it, her fingers trembling slightly. The color drained from her face. "Black Talon." She looked up, her voice tight. "They're a private weapons syndicate, former military contractors. We've been chasing their trail for over a year. Every time we get close, the evidence disappears. Files deleted. Witnesses vanish." Ethan stared into the fire. "They killed my team," he said, voice low. 15 men. SWAT operation gone wrong, 5 years ago. We thought we were hitting a trafficking cell. Instead, we walked into an ambush." Their eyes met. Hers filled with realization. His with the dull echo of loss. The room fell silent. The crackling wood the only sound. Logan poured Kara a cup of water and sat beside her. "You're saying these bastards are still operating on our soil?" Kara nodded. "And someone inside law enforcement is helping them. They knew my route, my tracker, everything. That update I installed wasn't from our tech division. It was a ghost line. They hijacked my system and forced my car off the road. Ethan's jaw tightened. Which means they'll come to finish the job. For a long moment, no one spoke. The captured man stirred, muttering something in a foreign language before going still again. Ranger sat at attention beside him, growling low, eyes glinting with readiness. Ethan finally said, "We move before nightfall. If they know she's alive, they'll send more." Kara hesitated. "You don't have to get involved." He met her gaze. "Too late for that." Outside, the forest shimmered under the noon sun, pristine and untouched. But beneath its quiet surface, blood had already soaked into the snow. The storm returned with a vengeance that night. Wind howled through the pine forest like a wounded beast, rattling the old cabin until it seemed the whole mountain was groaning. Snow hammered the roof in steady, relentless waves, erasing the world beyond the window. Inside, the small room flickered in the orange light of the fire. Kara sat on the edge of the wooden table, her left arm in a sling fashioned from an old shirt, her skin still pale from blood loss, but her eyes sharper than before. Across from her, Ethan hunched over the tin box, the mysterious metal fragment gleaming faintly in the firelight. He'd cleaned it, turning it carefully with a screwdriver. Beneath the soot, tiny circuits and a burnt transmitter coil were visible. "EMP emitter," Ethan muttered. "Low-frequency directional pulse. It can short the steering and ignition in seconds." His tone was flat, professional, the kind that belonged to a man who'd once dismantled bombs for a living. Kara leaned forward, curiosity flashing in her dark brown eyes. "Military grade?" she asked. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah. Someone used this to force your car off the road. That's not street tech. That's black market. My guess, Black Talon engineers." Kara frowned, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Then they've evolved. They used to only move product, not develop it." Ranger stirred by the door, the shepherd's amber eyes tracking their every word. He had sensed the tension long before either human said a thing. Ethan reached over, absently scratching the back of the dog's neck. Ranger leaned into the touch but didn't relax. His gaze stayed on the window, ears twitching at every gust of wind. Kara stood slowly, pacing near the fire. She looked less like a wounded victim now and more like a detective in control again. Tall, lean, with an intensity that could strip lies from a suspect. "Someone inside my department fed them my location," she said. "That's the only way they could have known my route through the ridge." Ethan didn't argue. He simply gave a small nod, as if confirming what she already knew. "You said your files were encrypted. Someone must have been monitoring your case." She turned toward him. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" His face shifted, a shadow crossing it. 5 years ago, he said quietly. "My team was ambushed by men using similar tech. We never found out who supplied it, but their insignia matched the knife you found." For a moment, silence filled the cabin. Outside, the storm screamed. Then, Ranger's head snapped up. A low, guttural growl rumbled from his chest. Ethan froze. "Lights," he said sharply. Kara reached over and killed the oil lamp. The cabin plunged into darkness, broken only by the faint red glow of the embers in the stove. Ranger's growl deepened. From outside, through the shriek of the wind, faint engine sounds hummed. Multiple vehicles. Headlights flickered between the trees, cutting through the snow. Ethan's pulse spiked. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He moved with silent efficiency, the reflexes of a soldier reawakening. He grabbed his rifle from the wall, checked the chamber, and tossed Kara a spare pistol from the drawer. She caught it, her hand steady despite the tremor of pain in her shoulder. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan crouched by the window. "Your badge," he said suddenly. "You brought your ID from the crash?" Kara blinked. "It's in my coat pocket." "Why?" "Federal badges carry biometric tags," he said grimly. "They're tracking you through it." She swore under her breath and ripped it free, tossing it into the fire. The metal hissed and blackened as it melted, but it was too late. Shadows were moving through the snow outside, 4, maybe 5 figures in dark gear. They moved like professionals, weapons drawn, formation tight. "Positions," Ethan said. Kara slid behind the table, using it as cover. Ranger crouched low near the door, silent and coiled. Ethan aimed through the cracked blinds, watching as the lead attacker raised his hand to signal. A flash. Then the cabin's front door exploded inward. Gunfire shattered the night. The roar of automatic rifles filled the room. Ethan fired back in controlled bursts, every shot measured. Kara ducked low, returning fire through the kitchen wall. Splinters flew. Smoke filled the air. Ranger lunged through the broken window, tackling a figure who'd tried to flank the cabin. Snow and blood churned together as the dog brought him down. Inside, Ethan switched to his sidearm as the attackers advanced. One of them kicked over the lantern, sending firelight sprawling across the floor. Kara rolled to the side, hit her shoulder hard but kept firing. Her bullet caught a man in the leg. He dropped with a scream. The chaos lasted barely 2 minutes, but it felt eternal. When the echoes finally faded, 3 of the attackers were down. One fled into the woods, and one, barely conscious, lay pinned beneath Ranger's weight. Ethan moved fast, securing the captive with zip ties. The man was in his late 30s, shaved head, neck tattoo half hidden under his jacket collar. A black falcon's claw. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and utterly unafraid. "You should have stayed out of this," he spat, blood streaking his lip. Kara approached, breathing hard. "Who sent you?" the man sneered. "You think you're the only one who's been hunting shadows? You've got a leak, sweetheart. Your boss sold you out the minute you touched those files." She froze. "What did you say?" "Someone high up in your chain," he hissed. "Feeds intel straight to Black Talon. We don't make a move without him." Kara's hands clenched. "Who is it? Give me a name." The man grinned despite his injuries, his teeth red. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you!" Ethan's patience snapped. He crouched low, voice cold as the snow outside. "Try me," the captive's smirk faltered. "They call him—" The rest was lost in an instant. A sharp crack split the air, glass shattered, and the man's head jerked back, lifeless. Kara screamed and dropped behind the table. Ethan tackled her to the floor just as a second shot punched through the window frame. "Sniper!" he hissed. He crawled toward the side wall, grabbed his rifle and scanned the tree line through the broken pane. All he saw was white. The storm swallowed everything beyond 20 meters. Ranger barked furiously outside, circling back to the porch. Ethan pulled Kara to her feet. "We have to move. He's got range and line of sight." "Whoever's out there doesn't want him talking," Kara said, voice shaking but controlled. Ethan nodded grimly. And he knew something worth killing for. They ducked behind the stove, waiting for another shot. But none came. Only the moan of the wind and the creak of the trees. The sniper was gone, or maybe he'd never stayed long enough to be found. Kara exhaled, the adrenaline fading, replaced by exhaustion. Her face was streaked with soot, hair tangled, but her eyes still burned with fury. "A mole inside Federal. That's how they've been ahead of us this whole time." Ethan holstered his weapon. "Then we can't trust anyone on your team. Not until we know who it is." She looked at him, searching his expression for something she couldn't name. Trust, maybe, or a reason to keep fighting. You saved my life twice in 24 hours. Why? Ethan turned to the window, staring out into the endless white. Because 5 years ago, no one saved mine. The fire crackled softly. Ranger laid down between them, his fur matted with melted snow, eyes still vigilant. The storm outside had started to ease, but the air inside the cabin was heavy, with truth, with fear, with the promise of what would come next. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees, a rifle shell cooled in the snow, smoke rising briefly before disappearing into the night. For 3 days, the forest lay still under the weight of melting snow. The sky above Pine Ridge turned from gray to a weary blue, and the wind that once screamed through the trees now whispered softly between the branches. Inside the cabin, warmth returned, a fragile illusion of safety. But Ethan Cross knew better. Silence was just another shape of danger. He sat by the window, watching the horizon through a pair of field binoculars, his body taut with readiness. Every crunch of snow outside, every shift of shadow in the woods, kept his finger close to the trigger. Behind him, Kara Holt was standing without the sling now, her shoulders still sore but her movements controlled. She wore a black parka borrowed from Logan, her hair tied back, her expression sharp with determination. The days of rest hadn't softened her. If anything, they had hardened the lines around her eyes. The near-death encounter had burned away hesitation, leaving only resolve. She had spent most of the time analyzing what little data she had left. Fragments of case files, traces of digital signatures, incomplete radio logs, all leading back to the same conclusion. The leak inside her department wasn't a rumor. It was a certainty. At the table sat Logan Pierce, still bruised from the skirmish, but alert, his thick hands cradling a mug of coffee. The forest ranger's usual calm had been replaced by the grim look of a man ready to face something he didn't fully understand. His loyalty to Ethan was unwavering. He didn't ask for explanations, only instructions. Kara set down her laptop, its cracked screen flickering faintly. "I've sent a coded message through my secure channel," she said. "It claims I've confirmed the location of the Black Talon's primary weapons cache. I made sure the message would be intercepted." Ethan looked over. "So you're the bait?" Kara nodded. "Exactly. If the leak is real, and it is, they'll take the shot before I can reach headquarters. We just have to make sure we're the ones doing the hunting this time." Ranger, lying near the fireplace, lifted his head at the word hunt. The German shepherd's coat shimmered in the firelight, muscles coiled under his fur. He stood, stretched, and padded over to Ethan, resting his muzzle on the man's gloved hand as if sensing what was coming. Ethan rubbed his ear absent-mindedly, eyes distant. "You realize," Logan said slowly, "if this goes wrong, we're not getting another chance. They'll send more than a cleanup crew next time." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we don't give them the chance." He turned to Kara. "We'll run this like a field op. You'll drive south toward the old highway. Make it look like you're heading for the federal office in Hamilton. I'll shadow you from the ridge trail. Ranger will move parallel to your route, tracking scent and sound. The moment they show, we strike." Kara gave a short nod, sliding her weapon into the holster. "I trust you know what you're doing." Ethan met her gaze, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his eyes. "I used to." By noon, the trap was set. Kara's SUV, borrowed from Logan's outpost, cut through the slushy road like a dark arrow. The forest loomed on both sides, tall and silent. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel as she glanced at the mirror. The mountains behind were swallowed in fog, but she knew Ethan was somewhere back there, watching every move. The radio crackled softly with static. Her own breathing sounded loud inside the cabin. "Nothing yet," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. The seconds stretched into minutes. Then Ranger's tracking beacon flickered on Ethan's handheld receiver. Movement, fast, coordinated, closing in from the west. "Two vehicles," Ethan muttered under his breath, crouched behind a fallen log on the ridgeline. Through his binoculars, he saw them. Black SUVs, unmarked, snow chains clattering over the ice. Their formation was precise. Military. "Right on cue," he said. He pressed his earpiece. "Kara, incoming, 3 o'clock, don't stop." Her reply came tight and steady. "Copy." The first SUV accelerated, cutting across the road to block her path. The second closed in from behind. Kara's pulse spiked, but her training kicked in. She slammed the brakes, skidding the car sideways. The men poured out, black-clad and masked. One aimed a rifle directly at the driver's side window. Before he could fire, Kara ducked low and rolled out the opposite door, landing hard on the icy ground. The air filled with gunfire, sharp, cold echoes bouncing off the trees. From the ridge, Ethan opened fire with his rifle, precise and deadly. The first assailant went down instantly. Ranger charged from the tree line, a streak of fur and fury, hitting one of the men in the legs, dragging him down with savage force. Kara scrambled behind a snowbank, returning fire with quick bursts. Bullets tore through branches above her head. The fight was fast, brutal, and efficient. Within minutes, 2 of the attackers were down. Another fled towards the vehicles. "Ethan, the driver," Kara shouted. "On it." Ethan slid down the slope, his boots slicing through the snow. The last man, tall and wiry with a distinctive limp, dove into the SUV and started the engine. Ethan sprinted, the world narrowing to a single objective. He leaped onto the back bumper as the car lurched forward, pulling a small cylindrical device from his jacket, a magnetic GPS tracker. With one swift motion, he slapped it under the vehicle's frame, feeling the vibration click as it locked. Then he let go, rolling into the snow as the SUV roared off into the forest road. Kara ran to him, breath clouding the air. "You good?" Ethan rose, brushing the snow from his jacket. "Better than him. That tracker will give us a location in an hour." They turned toward the wreck of the ambush, the SUVs riddled with bullet holes, the scent of gunpowder heavy in the air. Ranger stood near one of the fallen men, watching silently, his breath visible in the cold. Kara approached the body, kneeling beside it. The man's glove had slipped off, revealing a ring, not a wedding band, but a silver signet engraved with the same black talon emblem. She looked up at Ethan. "They're organized. Military background, chain of command. Whoever runs this isn't just a black market dealer. He's building an army." Ethan stared into the forest where the last SUV had disappeared. His expression was stone. "Then we cut the head off before it grows." As they loaded back into the car, the snow began to fall again, soft, quiet, almost peaceful. But the road ahead was lined with invisible eyes. Kara felt the unease settle deep in her chest. This wasn't the end of the hunt. It was only the invitation. By the time they returned to the cabin, the GPS receiver was already blinking with a red dot. Deep in the northwest quadrant of the Pine Ridge wilderness, Ethan leaned over the screen, his voice low. "That's 30 miles out, middle of nowhere." Kara met his gaze, and for the first time, there was a hint of grim satisfaction in her tone. "Then we found their den." Ranger let out a low bark, tail stiff, as if he too understood what came next. The serpent had been lured out, and soon its nest would burn. The night was cold enough to freeze breath mid-air. The forest stretched ahead like a labyrinth of black and white. Snow draped over the pines, moonlight casting thin silver scars across the frozen ground. Ethan Cross tightened the strap on his rifle as he followed the trail marked by the blinking GPS on his handheld device. Kara Holt walked just behind him, her face hidden beneath the hood of her parka, her breath shallow but controlled. The signal on the tracker pulsed steady, red, rhythmic, leading them deeper into the heart of Pine Ridge. Ranger trotted a few paces ahead, nose low, tail stiff. The shepherd's paws left clean prints in the snow, his body moving with the fluid confidence of an animal that understood danger but did not fear it. Every few steps, he stopped, sniffed the air, and looked back toward Ethan as if to say, "We're close." Behind them came Logan Pierce, his frame bulky under layers of winter gear, the barrel of his shotgun glinting faintly. His breath came in controlled bursts. Years in the wilderness had taught him to move quietly, even with lungs built for shouting. He was the anchor of the group, always watching their six, his sharp eyes cutting through the dark. The blinking red dot on the GPS screen stopped moving. Ethan slowed, raising a hand. "This is it," he said softly. Kara stepped beside him, her gloved hand tightening on her sidearm. Before them, half buried under ice and fallen branches, stood a structure that at first looked like a derelict maintenance station. Metal siding rusted by years of weather, a faded sign half covered in frost reading Ridgefield Biological Research Facility. Kara's voice was low but steady. "A front." Ethan scanned the perimeter through his thermal scope. "No heat signatures outside, but the power grid's live. They've buried their real entrance underground." Logan approached the outer wall, brushing away snow with his glove. Beneath the layer of rust, he revealed a steel door fitted with a keypad. "Military-grade lock," he muttered. "You'd need clearance codes or explosives." Ethan smirked faintly. "Good thing we brought both." From his pack, he retrieved a small breaching charge, carefully setting it near the base of the lock. Kara crouched nearby, checking her watch. "We go in fast, get the files, and get out before they know we're here." Ethan gave a curt nod. "Logan, cover the rear. If anyone shows up, stall them. Kara, you're with me. Ranger takes point." The charge went off with a muffled thump, sending a brief shockwave through the cold air. The door gave way, swinging inward with a groan that echoed down the empty corridor beyond. The smell hit them first, metal, oil, and something acrid like ozone. They stepped inside. The interior was unnervingly clean. Fluorescent lights hummed faintly, reflecting off stainless steel walls. The floor gleamed, untouched by dust. Kara frowned. "This place isn't abandoned, it's active!" Ranger's low growl confirmed it. He padded forward, stopping at a junction where the hallway split in two. His nose twitched, then he turned left, tail rigid. Ethan followed the dog's lead. Down the corridor, they found a door marked Storage B3, authorized personnel only. He pried it open with a crowbar, revealing shelves stacked with crates stamped with serial numbers, each one labeled with military abbreviations and international port codes. Kara's eyes widened. Shipment manifests, weapons components. This is the distribution hub. She opened one crate, revealing disassembled rifle parts, all tagged and polished. Hidden beneath them were sealed folders, documents bearing federal stamps that should have never left government custody. Her breath caught. "These files, these are procurement orders, signed by active officials. My God, they have people inside defense." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Take everything we can carry. The rest we burn." While Kara photographed each document, Ethan scanned the walls, noticing faint lines of circuitry running through the concrete, embedded transmitters. "They've got anti-detection emitters everywhere," he muttered. "This whole place is a black hole for signals." Logan's voice crackled through the comm. Movement outside. 2 trucks. You've got company. Ethan swore under his breath. They must have sensors tied to the door breach. We're out of time. Kara snapped her camera shut. If we can get to their central control, I can override the interference. Send our location to the Bureau. Ethan pointed down the hallway. Control center should be near the main power grid. Go. Ranger with her. As Kara and Ranger moved ahead, Ethan pulled a small bag of C4 from his pack and began rigging the exits. Logan appeared moments later, his shotgun raised. 2 men down outside, he said, but more are circling. Ethan met his eyes. We blow the exit once Kara sends the signal. After that, we fight our way out. The corridor trembled slightly, a dull thud echoing through the walls. Kara's voice came over the radio. Found the main console. Give me 60 seconds. In the control room, Kara's fingers flew over the keyboard, her face illuminated by the green glow of the monitor. Lines of encrypted data scrolled across the screen as she bypassed layer after layer of firewalls. Behind her, Ranger stood guard, ears twitching at every distant sound. Then the system beeped. Signal interference disengaged. Kara opened the secure channel, transmitting the coordinates. This is Agent Kara Holt, Division 6. Priority code Red. I'm sending verified data on Black Talon's location and operation. Request immediate backup. Repeat, immediate backup. Static crackled, then a faint voice replied, Copy that, Agent Holt. Stand by. Relief flooded her chest, but it lasted only a second. Ranger barked sharply, turning toward the door. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Ethan's voice cut in. They're breaching from the south wing. Get out now! Kara grabbed the data drive, slung her pack, and ran. Ranger stayed close, his body low and tense. The corridor erupted in chaos. Gunfire, shouts, alarms blaring. Ethan and Logan were already exchanging fire, their weapons barking short, controlled bursts. The muzzle flashes painted the walls red. Go! Ethan shouted, covering her advance. Kara sprinted past, her boots slipping on the polished floor. Logan tossed a flash grenade behind them, the explosion lighting up the corridor in white fire. They burst through the main hallway, reaching the exit. Charges set, Ethan called, flipping the detonator cap. Once we're clear, I blow it. Kara and Logan reached the tree line first. Ranger bolted after them, barking furiously. Ethan ran last, the detonator in hand. Behind him, the facility's doors swung open as armed men poured out. Too late. The explosion tore through the night like a thunderclap. Fire erupted from the earth, consuming the false research center in a blaze that turned snow to steam. The shockwave rattled the trees, sending a storm of ash and ice into the air. Ethan dropped to one knee, chest heaving, watching the flames rise. Kara stood beside him, clutching the data drive, her expression unreadable. Logan looked back once, jaw set. The facility was gone, but the war it represented had just begun. The night sky above Pine Ridge was a dying ember, black slowly giving way to gray. Smoke still coiled from the cratered ruins of the false research facility, a smoldering wound in the frozen earth. Ethan Cross stood on the ridge, his breath visible in the morning chill, scanning the valley below through his binoculars. Kara Holt sat a few feet away, beside the still form of Logan Pierce, pressing gauze to the gash in his shoulder. His face was pale but defiant, the sort of look only men who had lived too many near-death nights could wear. Ranger stood guard near the tree line. Fur bristled, amber eyes glinting in the cold light. He had not slept. None of them had. Kara's laptop balanced across her knees, the cracked screen displaying lines of encrypted code. The files are partial, she murmured, typing rapidly. They fragmented during the upload. I can restore them, but... She stopped, glancing up. Something's overriding the sequence, Someone's accessing it remotely. Ethan lowered the binoculars, his voice hard. From where? Before she could answer, the low hum of an approaching engine echoed through the forest. Ethan and Logan exchanged glances. Ranger gave a warning growl, his nose twitching toward the slope. A black SUV appeared at the edge of the clearing, its tires crunching on the frozen dirt. The vehicle was government-issued, sleek and spotless, an odd sight amid the destruction. The driver's door opened. Roy Beckett stepped out. He was in his mid-40s, tall and sharply built, his short blonde hair slicked neatly back despite the wind. His face carried the angular confidence of a man long accustomed to control. Square jaw, cold blue eyes, a faint scar along his cheekbone. He wore his federal badge openly on his belt, and a faint smile played at his lips, the kind that made men uneasy without knowing why. "Agent Holt," he called, voice smooth as polished steel. "You're a hard woman to find." Kara froze. Ethan raised his rifle, keeping it low but ready. Beckett lifted his hands slightly, a picture of calm authority. "Relax, Cross. I'm on your side. Headquarters received your transmission. I'm here to extract you and your team." Ethan didn't lower the gun. "Funny," he said, "since the Bureau doesn't usually send security heads alone into a war zone." Beckett's smile didn't falter. "You underestimate me." He stepped closer, gloved boots crunching in the snow. "I've been overseeing this operation for months. You've done excellent work, both of you. But now you need to stand down. The Bureau will take it from here." Kara's instinct screamed against his calm tone. "You knew," she said softly. "You knew where we were before the signal even went through." For the briefest instant, Beckett's eyes flicked, too fast for most to notice, but not for Ethan. It was the same tell he'd seen in interrogations before. The microsecond of a liar caught off guard. Ranger growled low, hackles rising. Beckett's smile vanished. "You're out of your depth, Holt," he said, voice darkening. "You should have stayed in your lane. But curiosity always kills something, doesn't it?" The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then Ethan saw movement behind Beckett. Two figures stepping from the passenger side of the SUV, both clad in tactical black, rifles at the ready. Their gear bore no insignia, but etched faintly on one man's shoulder plate was a symbol, a black talon grasping a circle. "Get down!" Ethan shouted. The clearing erupted. Gunfire cracked through the dawn. Kara dove behind a boulder, dragging Logan with her. Ethan dropped to one knee, returning fire. Ranger lunged forward, barking ferociously, darting between bursts of bullets. Beckett fired back, his badge gleaming under the morning light like mockery. A bullet ricocheted off a tree beside Kara's head. She rolled, aimed, and fired. One of Beckett's men fell, clutching his chest. Logan, despite his wound, took aim with his shotgun and blasted the second assailant, sending him sprawling. But Beckett was fast. Too fast. He moved with the precision of a trained operative, his stance perfect, his aim steady. He fired. Logan grunted, falling backward, blood blooming across his jacket. Kara screamed, crawling toward him. Beckett advanced, voice cold and methodical. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. The Bureau's rotten from the inside out, Holt. You think you're saving it? You're standing in its ashes." Ethan emerged from cover, fury in his eyes. "You sold your oath," he said, his voice low and controlled. "You killed my team. All for what? Money?" Beckett's expression hardened. "Not money. Power. The kind you can't imagine, soldier." Before he could fire again, a blur of movement cut across the snow. Ranger. The shepherd launched himself at Beckett, jaws clamping down on the man's arm. Beckett cursed, struggling as the dog's teeth tore through the fabric of his coat. Ethan charged forward, slamming into Beckett and sending them both into the snow. The rifle skittered away. They grappled, trading heavy blows. Ethan's rage fueled him, but Beckett was younger, faster, a man forged in corruption and arrogance. He landed a punch that split Ethan's lip, then reached for the pistol at his hip. Before he could draw it, Kara fired. The bullet struck Beckett's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Ethan didn't hesitate. He tackled the man again, driving him into the frozen ground. Ranger bit down once more, this time on Beckett's leg, holding him still as Ethan twisted the gun from his hand. "It's over," Ethan hissed. Beckett laughed bitterly, blood staining his teeth. "You think this ends with me? You're too late. They've already moved the inventory. You destroyed one outpost, but there are others. You can't stop what's coming." Ethan's finger twitched on the trigger. For a heartbeat, he saw not Beckett, but the faces of his fallen team. Ghosts in the snow, their voices silent. Then he exhaled slowly, stepping back. "No," he said quietly, "but you'll answer for it." Kara pulled the emergency beacon from her pack and slammed it into the ground. It flared bright red. A moment later, Ethan aimed his rifle toward the ruined facility and fired into the control grid, shattering the remaining interference unit. Sparks cascaded like dying stars as the signal surged upward through the atmosphere. Within minutes, the distant thrum of rotor blades filled the air. Black helicopters crested the ridge, sunlight glinting off their sides. The FBI had arrived. Agents swarmed the clearing, securing Beckett and his remaining men. One of them, a woman in tactical gear with dark skin and sharp eyes, nodded toward Kara. "We got your transmission. Backup's here." Kara collapsed beside Logan, relief and exhaustion warring across her face. He was still breathing, faint but steady. Ethan stood apart from the chaos, watching the sun rise over the forest. The snow reflected the dawn's fire, turning the world gold and crimson. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. He looked at Ranger, whose muzzle was streaked with blood but whose tail wagged weakly. "It's done," Ethan whispered. But somewhere deep down, he knew it wasn't. The snow had finally surrendered to the sun. Meltwater trickled down the rocky slopes of Pine Ridge, carving silver threads through the thawing earth. The air smelled of pine resin and damp soil, and the forest, once a fortress of ice and silence, now sang with the faint hum of spring. The war was over, at least the kind that involved bullets and betrayal. But inside Ethan Cross, another battle was still quietly unfolding. He sat on the porch of his cabin, boots up on the railing, watching the fog lift off the valley below. His hair had grown longer, streaks of silver glinting under the soft light. The bruises on his knuckles had faded, though the scars on his arms remained, reminders not of pain, but of survival. Beside him, Ranger, the German shepherd, lay stretched out in the sun, his fur gleaming bronze where it caught the light. The dog's once constant vigilance had softened. Now he slept deeply, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, content for the first time in months. Ethan lifted his mug of black coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him. Around the cabin, the forest had come alive, birds darting between branches, squirrels chasing each other across the moss. But the silence that lingered within him was harder to shake. He had turned down every medal, every ceremony the Bureau had tried to hand him. He didn't want applause. He wanted distance, from the city, from the headlines, from the ghosts of his team who still visited him in the quiet hours of dawn. A soft knock echoed from the doorframe. He turned, and there she was. Kara Holt stood on the steps, dressed in a light gray field jacket and jeans, her dark hair loose for once, catching the golden breeze. The weeks since the raid had changed her. She looked lighter, the perpetual tension in her shoulders replaced by something gentler, though her eyes still held that depth of someone who'd seen too much and refused to look away. She held 2 coffee cups in a cardboard tray and a small envelope tucked under one arm. "Didn't think you'd still be here," she said with a faint smile. Ethan gestured towards the empty chair beside him. "Guess the forest got used to me." Kara set the cups down, the aroma of roasted beans mixing with pine. "You could have taken the commendation," she said softly. "You earned it." He shrugged. "Didn't do it for the Bureau." "For who then?" she asked, sitting beside him. Ethan took a sip before answering. "For the ones who didn't make it back. For myself, maybe. Or because someone had to finish what they started." She nodded slowly. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that 2 people shared when words had already been spent. After a moment, Kara reached into the envelope and slid a faded photograph onto the table. It was a team photo, 5 men in tactical gear, smiling under a desert sun. The edges were torn, the colors sun-bleached, but Ethan recognized it instantly. His team, his brothers. In the center, a younger version of himself stood with his arm slung around another man's shoulders, the medic, Daniels, grinning like the world hadn't yet broken them. Kara's voice was quiet. "I found this in the Black Talon files. Beckett kept it as part of his archive. Maybe as a trophy, I don't know. But I figured it belonged to someone else." Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. For a moment, the weight of the years pressed down on him, the gunfire, the sand, the screams. He saw the faces he had buried in silence, now smiling up from the worn paper. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice rough. Kara leaned back, her gaze fixed on the trees. "You know, they're talking about starting a task force, one that actually roots out corruption in federal intelligence. They asked me to lead it." Ethan gave a small smile. "You'll do fine." "You could help," she said, glancing at him. "You don't have to stay out here forever." He looked at her then, really looked, the determination, the compassion, the fatigue beneath it all. And for a heartbeat, he saw himself reflected in her. The same fire that once drove him before it turned to ashes. "Maybe someday," he said. "But for now, I think the world can manage without me." She studied him, then exhaled, accepting his answer without pushing further. Ranger stirred beside them, stretching and letting out a soft huff before settling back into sleep. Kara smiled. "He seems happy." "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice soft. "He deserves it. We all do." They sat in silence for a long while, watching sunlight filter through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of a river carried through the air, mingled with the first chirps of spring birds. Kara reached for her coffee, lifting it in a small toast. "To second chances," she said. Ethan clinked his mug lightly against hers. "And to ghosts finally resting." A breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Kara stood, brushing the dirt from her jeans. "You'll visit someday?" "Maybe," he said, smiling faintly, "if the city doesn't forget how to breathe." She gave him one last look, not of farewell, but of understanding, then turned toward her car parked at the edge of the clearing. The engine started, its hum fading into the distance until only the forest remained. Ethan sat back, the photograph still in his hand. He looked at it one last time before tucking it into the wooden frame above the fireplace inside. The faces watched over him, no longer as ghosts, but as memory, quiet and steady, like the heartbeat of the mountains themselves. When he stepped back outside, Ranger had moved to the edge of the porch, watching the horizon where the morning sun painted the pines gold. Ethan joined him, one hand resting lightly on the dog's back. The air was cool, filled with promise. "Guess it's just us again," Ethan murmured. Ranger wagged his tail once, a slow, contented motion. The forest answered with a rustle of wind, soft and low, as though even the earth was breathing easier now. For the first time in years, Ethan smiled without guilt. The shadows were gone, the snow had melted, and Pine Ridge, the place that had hidden him from the world, now felt like home. In the quiet after the storm, when the snow melts and the forest breathes again, we are reminded that every ending carries the seed of renewal. The story of Ethan, Kara, and Ranger is more than a tale of survival. It is a quiet testament to faith, redemption, and the mysterious ways God moves through our lives. Sometimes His miracles do not arrive with thunder or light, but in the small mercies that guide us home. A loyal companion who never gives up, a stranger who becomes family, a morning sun after a night that felt endless. If you have ever felt lost, remember, no shadow lasts forever when you walk with faith. God's grace can reach even the loneliest cabin, even the most wounded soul. Share this story if it touched your heart. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to hear more stories of courage, hope, and divine light in unexpected places. May God bless and protect you and your loved ones, today and always.